Ideas called him a contrarian. They won't even take him seriously. In other words, if you don't come to the table already believing in global warming, then any evidence that you cite, we're just going to laugh away, and we're going to say you're one of these skeptics, or you're just a contrarian.
You're uninformed, and you don't
in
know.
other words, we're not even going to interact with the idea, well, why are the ice caps on Mars shrinking? It's certainly not because we're making CO2 on Earth.
Could our CO2 be wafting its way through space to Mars?
Maybe it's one of those probes carried some with it
Maybe
and dropped it off.
Yeah, it could be. Maybe there's a conspiracy.
Well, the point is, dear ones, when are we going to start thinking? Now, people might be saying, well, this is not a spiritual issue. Yes, it is a spiritual issue. If we're willing to believe what we're being told to believe by the world out there, in order to get us to let down our national identity, because this is a global problem, we're going to have a global solution.
And a global tax.
And every nation has to come under some authority to tell them to quit using hydrocarbons. We're allowing ourselves to be set up for the one world government that the Bible predicts. And we're not thinking. And these Christian leaders that sign these global warming documents are showing themselves to be untrustworthy as leaders. Why? Because they're not using critical thinking. And if they're not using it about this, they're probably not using it about the Bible either.
Right. In what other ways will they be deceived?
They're deceived because they feel like they got to jump on the global bandwagon. They're not willing to think for themselves. They're not willing to speak up. I'm not embarrassed to go against the whole world on this because I know that no one on the face of the earth knows what the climate's going to be like 10 years from now. Nor does anyone know for certainty that carbon dioxide levels that may be higher than they would be if we weren't on the earth are going to cause global catastrophe.
We've been discussing Mars and all sorts of different variables and causes of this so-called global warming. Everyone's familiar with the term greenhouse gas. And the greenhouse effect. Bob, you've got to save us from this greenhouse gas.
That's what our authors, Essex and McKittrick, call a lying metaphor. In other words, when people don't want to think, you just give them a metaphor. So in other words, if you have to do all this study to figure out how climate works, that might give me a headache. So we'll just say greenhouse. You know what a greenhouse is like.
I can associate with that. Yeah. I've been in them.
Yeah.
Hot in there.
So, yeah, it's a greenhouse effect. Well, what I love about this book is they totally debunk that. The greenhouse metaphor is a lying metaphor on two major levels.
Let's hear them.
Two major levels. Number one, greenhouses are not warm because they did something to change infrared radiated energy. Let me back up here and explain what that is. There's two ways that energy is exchanged coming in and coming out from the Earth.
Okay.
One is through fluid dynamics, and the other is through infrared radiation. Now, CO2 is a gas that will affect infrared radiation, and there's other ones that do. CO2 is not even the most important one. Well over 95% of the gas that holds infrared radiative energy is water vapor.
Water vapor.
Water vapor. Water vapor is just way, way more important than carbon dioxide. Mm-hmm. And they don't even talk about that. Now, let's talk about greenhouses, right?
Sure.
So you have fluid dynamics, which is the turbulence and the movement of energy through a system through turbulence.
Okay.
And you have infrared radiation. Now, the greenhouse shuts off one of those two. But what it shuts off is the fluid dynamic exchange of energy. Mm-hmm. In other words, you're putting up a physical barrier that keeps the fluid dynamics within and not getting out.
No escape.
No escape. But infrared radiated energy can still escape from a greenhouse or come in and go out. So that's not the dynamic of it. So you don't create the greenhouse by having carbon dioxide in it. That's not what makes it work. It's the physical barrier of the plastic or the glass or whatever to cut off the fluid flow of energy. Let me quote our authors. A greenhouse acts like the picture on the bottom. They show this in a graphic. Someone comes and shuts off the fluid dynamical energy drain from the surface by putting something up like glass or plastic that the inbound solar radiation can pass through, but air cannot. It doesn't matter what the material is, the effect is quite pronounced. The explanation is both theoretically and experimentally certain. So it's predictable. You can create a greenhouse, it will work. Now, is CO2 a greenhouse gas? Well, here's the interesting thing. The problem the greenhouses have is they start having a lack of CO2. And the reason for that is plants use CO2 and take it out of the air and put oxygen in.
Right.
So you have a greenhouse that's full of plants, and the dynamic energy drain is cut off by the glass.
Sure, a barrier.
Okay, so the CO2 is getting drawn out of the atmosphere, and it gets to low levels, and the greenhouse starts underperforming. The things don't grow well in it. So in order to enhance the effectiveness of a greenhouse, they have to often create a source of carbon dioxide, like burning a propane or something, and dumping the exhaust in there to get more CO2 into the greenhouse.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so greenhouses are known for a lack of CO2. So CO2 is it's not a greenhouse gas, okay? And the fact that CO2 is an infrared absorbing gas is not what makes a greenhouse work, because it wouldn't work because they tend to lack CO2. So the whole thing is bunkum.
Bogus.
It's bogus. There's no greenhouse effect, and CO2 is not a greenhouse gas, and the only way the Earth could warm via greenhouse is you somehow would have to put a barrier around the Earth to stop the fluid dynamic drain of energy. You're going to put the Earth in a big plastic bubble. Maybe you could do that. No.
Well,
so why do they keep talking about greenhouse? Well, because they want to give you some simple thing that you can relate to, even though
buzzword that everyone identifies with a problem.
Even though it has absolutely nothing to do with what they claim they're afraid is going to happen, which isn't probably happening anyhow. So there are so many complexities to this, and the greenhouse metaphor is just trying to make something complex simple and sell an idea to the public who are unsuspecting and unable to critically examine the facts for themselves because they haven't been trained.
It's a bill of goods, but who's going to be the wiser?
Yeah, and people are so convinced of this lie that they're willing to impoverish themselves because they think they're doing something noble. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Dear Christians, don't allow yourself to be deceived. And next week, we're going to talk about just how much CO2 humans contribute. We're going to talk about the difference between nescience, it's a new word for some people, and uncertainty. And we're going to answer the questions we raised in the very first program about the doctrine of certainty. We're going to answer each one of those questions. We're going to take all 9 questions, and we'll answer them one by one based on what we've learned, what we've been discussing. But for now, we would say if somebody's trying to sell you a bill of goods, buyer beware. We're not saying we know the Earth is going to cool in the future. We're not saying we know that your Earth is going to warm in the future. We're saying nobody knows the future climate of planet Earth because it's not really something that we can predict.
Well said. Exactly. Well, I think that's it for today, Bob. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And remember, if anyone would like to visit our church or contact us, remember it's Twin City Fellowship located in Minneapolis. Our phone number is 952-935-3100. Again, 952-935-3100. And we are on the web at www.cicministry.org. For Critical Issues Commentary, this is Todd Kramasz.
And Bob DeWaay.
And thank you, everybody. We'll talk again soon.